Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey, founders, and thanks for listening. Today, I'm speaking with Ethan Ruby, CEO and co-founder of SaaSGrid, a SaaS data platform that's raised over $3 million in funding. Ethan, thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be here, Brett.
No problem at all. I'm super excited to have you as well. So I'd love to kick off with learning about your experience at Zenefits. Obviously, I've read a lot of the media headlines at the time. I heard it was a crazy place, but take us back to 2014 and tell us about your experience at Zenefits.
Yeah, absolutely. Zenefits definitely was a crazy time. So Zenefits was my first job out of college. I did not know what I wanted to do with my career, wasn't necessarily looking to join a startup, but ended up with a job offer. So came out to San Francisco to start. This was right after Zenefits I think when I signed, they were a Series A company and they raised their Series B right before I joined. So I was about the 100th employee. And yeah, it was a wild ride. I think Zenefits was a really awesome business, still is a really awesome product. It's owned by TriNet now, but we grew extremely fast. So I was about the 100th employee. And in the first year, we scaled to something like 1,500 employees, brought on tens of thousands of very small businesses onto our HR platform, which really started as a small business insurance platform. And so, yeah, I started my career on the operations side, trying to figure out how we were going to provide health insurance to these thousands of small businesses that entrusted Zenefits with that. And so it was a huge learning experience. I learned how to grow and manage a team very early on in my career. I learned a lot about how to build products and how to build teams to service customers. I learned a few things about how to not build products and teams to service customers well. But yeah, there was certainly a lot of news about the time about what a wild ride it was, which is absolutely true. But overall, it was a really amazing startup in a lot of ways. And it was an amazing learning opportunity for me early in my career.
Looks like in 2018, then you switched over and went to the venture side and went over to Craft Ventures. What has it been like working at Craft before you spun out SaaSGrid?
Yeah. So another unintended career move that was maybe a theme, at least early on in my career. When I left Zenefits, I was looking to join another startup. I loved being at an early stage startup. I wanted to do that again, but I ended up just through a series of connections, Craft Ventures, which at that time was a brand new VC firm focused on SaaS, leading seed and Series A rounds for SaaS companies. And so before leaving to work on SaaSGrid full-time, I spent 6 years basically building out our investment process at SaaS, at Craft, meeting with and researching thousands of seed and Series A SaaS companies. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little more, but that was frankly a lot of the origin of where SaaSGrid came from. My main job at Craft was to build a process for doing financial diligence on the SaaS company that Craft was evaluating. And so I got a couple thousand reps literally over the 6 years of Craft about digging into early stage SaaS companies, looking through their financials, their usage metrics, all these things, and trying to understand which were on the verge of breaking out. So that's definitely formative, both in my own growth, but also in how I kind of formulated the idea for SaaS.
I think everyone listening to this podcast also listens to All In, so they're all very familiar with Zach's. I don't know if I have this right, but I think from my understanding, he incubates some companies or Craft incubates some companies and then sends them out. Is that what SaaSGrid was as well? Did it start at Craft Ventures and he spun it out? Or what's like that origin story and kind of the background there?
Yeah, good question. Happy to talk about that in a little more detail. So in short, like I mentioned, my job at Craft was to help run diligence for mostly Series A SaaS investments. And obviously, David, founder and GP at Craft, was a very close collaborator with me as we look through those numbers and help to make investment decisions. And so while Craft has intentionally incubated a few companies, SaaS was actually an unintentional incubation. Basically, I had this giant Google Sheets template that I was using to do diligence on SaaS companies. And it was basically our internal tool. And we ended up sharing that Google Sheet with some of our founders after we invested. And they're like, oh, this is helpful. This is basically a helpful spreadsheet template. So you're like, okay, cool. Well, what if instead of being a spreadsheet template, we hired a few contract developers and turned this into a really simple product? And I'm talking incredibly simple, that you just upload an Excel spreadsheet and we pop out a few charts for you. So we did that. And again, it was still it was mostly valuable. It was mostly an internal tool. We had no intention of spinning it out, but it ended up proving popular. It was the Craft investment team used it for every deal, and many of our founders did as well. And so at that point, when people started using that really basic MVP regularly, that's when David and I kind of put our heads together and be like, I bet if we incubated this and actually turned this into a data platform, this could be a real company. And so about, I would say 18 months ago or so, we set off in that direction. And I've been working on basically turning it into a full-fledged company ever since.
What was that transition like for you as you moved from the venture side to being a founder? What did you learn from that experience and that transition?
That being a founder is really hard. I think that, again, I talked a little bit about my early career growth. I'd been at an early stage company. I had experienced the startup life. I then became a VC where I spent literally all day, every day talking to founders. So I would say that I felt at least that I understood startups and being a founder pretty well, at least as well as you could without actually having done it. But I still got surprised by just the day-to-day, how many things are on a founder's plate that they have to take care of. I'm not an engineer, so that means I'm doing literally everything else. I do marketing, I do sales, I do onboarding, I do customer success, I do product, I do HR, I do finance. I have so much more respect I did for all the thousands of things that founders have to do and have to make happen in order to be successful. It still surprises me every day. There's probably a lot of things that I haven't even encountered yet that I'm going to have to take care of. So
what's a typical day look like for you right now?
Right now, it's really all about sales. And so we've been lucky. There's been great organic demand for SaaSGrid. And so we have a lot of companies coming to us and looking for help, basically saying like, hey, my company's starting to take off. I have all this data spread across HubSpot, Stripe, Salesforce, QuickBooks, whatever platform they use. And I need metrics to both pitch investors, but more importantly, to make good decisions about my business. And I'm overwhelmed by this data, don't know how to solve that. And so we have a lot of those companies coming to us. And I spend most of my day right now talking to those other founders or to those early finance employees about their problems they have and getting them set up on SaaSGrid. So it's been really rewarding to get to spend this much time with customers and to frankly validate a lot of the reason why we built SaaSGrid. People are having the exact pain that we hypothesized that they did, and we've been able to solve it, at least for a good subset of early customers. So yeah, that's been extremely exciting, but that's been most of my day-to-day so far. We're just now bringing on our first full-time account executive, and so that's going to be really exciting as I transition out of being the only frontline salesperson. But honestly, it's been a really rewarding period for me to really get in deep with our customers.
Are you worried at all about leaving behind founder-led sales and transitioning that over to someone else?
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is something where having been an investor is very top of mind because frankly, when working with founders as a VC, this is the thing we talked about all the time, like, hey, it's hard moving from founder-led sales to running a sales team. So it's definitely stressful because as a VC is something that we thought about all the time and talk with founders about all the time. It's really hard moving to founder-led sales. But I think our first account executive, he's a guy I've worked with before. I think he's going to be amazing. And the good news is I've only been selling SaaSGrid as a paid product for about 4 months. But because we sell to startups, we have relatively low ACVs and high velocity. And so we have dozens of paying customers on the platform. And I do feel like I've got enough reps that I've got developed a decent system and understanding of what our sales process looks like. And it's at least half-baked enough to start to turn it over to someone with some real sales skills to get going there.
When it comes to your market category, how are you thinking about it? Is it a SaaS data platform, SaaS metrics platform, or something that I didn't mention there?
Yeah, it's a combination of those things. So I say very simply, we are a vertical BI tool for SaaS companies. And so in that sense, obviously plenty of BI tools exist, but frankly, not a lot of vertical BI tools exist. And what I mean by that is if you are building out an analytics layer from scratch, you typically have to take your systems like Salesforce, Stripe, any of these systems you use, you have to put that data in a data warehouse, you then have to clean it, you then have to put it in a BI tool, you then have to write formulas for your metrics in order to get metrics out. Because we are verticalized, because we focus on SaaS companies, we can do all those pieces for our customers. So in a handful of clicks, you can go from here are my Salesforce credentials to here is my ARR and here is my net dollar retention. And here is my burn multiple and all these other important SaaS metrics. So we are all the above, but we really are first and foremost the analytics layer for SaaS companies.
What are the SaaS metrics that matter? I was reading a blog post that you'd written a couple of years ago, and I thought it was super valuable. So I'd love to talk through that. What are the ones that matter?
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of metrics that matter, as you can tell from that blog post. It certainly goes on and on. But the way that I think about it is I group metrics into 3 areas, and they really play off one another to create a holistic business. But the first one is growth. Simply put, we all know that startups need to grow fast. When you're starting from zero, you have to go pretty fast to get to scale. Investors want you to grow fast. You want to grow fast to validate the market, to get ahead of competitors. So your ARR and how fast you're growing is obviously a major component of that. The second is your retention. Basically, do your customers stick around? What you want to avoid is the classic, what's called a leaky bucket situation, where you sell customers and your growth is great, but ultimately your customers don't stick around very long. And so basically you get to the point where you scale a little bit and maybe you're selling a couple $100,000 a month of new business, but a few $100,000 a month of existing business is disappearing and you're not really growing. And so a lot of SaaSGrid is focused around different ways of tracking retention. There are several different methodologies, and we have some content on our website, SaaSGrid.com, that goes into them in detail. But really a huge part of what we do is, number one, break down all the different methodologies within SaaSGrid, and then provide the content and support to help you figure out which ones are most applicable for your business and your business model, and are going to help you best understand your customer behavior and if you're set up well to grow. And then the third big metrics area is around unit economics. And this is really simply, how efficiently do you grow and retain your customers? How much money do you have to put into your machine, right? SaaS businesses really are a machine. Hypothetically, you put money in to your engineering team, you put money into your sales team, you get money out and it sticks around for a long time. Some SaaS companies' machines work better than others. So efficiency is all about understanding, hey, when we put dollars into the machine, when we hire an engineer, when we hire a salesperson, when we do a marketing campaign, what do we get out of it? And ultimately, is what we get out of it in terms of growth, in terms of retention, what we need to create a sustainable business. And so there are SaaSGrid tracks, well over 100 metrics now, that look at these questions from a lot of different angles, but really they do boil down to those three areas, which are, and if you really understand those three areas, you can understand if you have a healthy business or not.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode. How would you describe your marketing philosophy right now?
Mostly non-existent. We've had a big benefit. Obviously, David is a big voice at Silicon Valley and a prolific writer on SaaS. And our kind of unfair advantage as a company is having him as a co-founder, because David is really obviously passionate about SaaS, extremely knowledgeable about SaaS, and loves metrics. And so he loves to talk about SaaSGrid. You've probably heard it on the All In Pod or some other talks he's done on other podcasts or at SaaSter. And frankly, right now, just by him talking about SaaSGrid and why companies need to get smart and disciplined around the metrics, we've had a ton of leads and a ton of companies interested in using SaaSGrid. So it's made it nice on me. I haven't had to do a lot of marketing so far.
When do you think that marketing need is going to kick in? Is that like 6 months from now or 12 months, or is that still years away until that becomes like urgent priority for you?
Yeah, it may be a year till it gets urgent, but I'm hoping to kind of in the next 6 months start to think about it, right? The thing that I've proven right now is, okay, right now with me as the only sales rep, I can stay plenty busy. So we're going to hire a sales rep and I know that he will be plenty busy. So the next question, if we want to continue to grow, is, okay, how do we add the next 2 to 3 sales reps and keep them busy? So at that point, when we hire that cohort and start thinking about that, I will definitely have to shift a lot of my attention to marketing and thinking about how do we reach even a broader audience with our message. And I think very importantly for us, one thing that has surprised me about SaaSGrid is that we obviously started knowing we'd be a compelling platform for early stage startups, but we are also a very compelling platform for later stage startups, for relatively large growth stage. It turns out I'm drowning in data and don't know what to do with it. Problem doesn't magically go away as you scale. And so hopefully in the next 6 months, I can start to spend more time doing content and messaging to these larger companies about why they also need a platform like SaaSGrid.
Is that hard trying to balance speaking to both of those very different groups? Even though they're both in SaaS, it seems like something that would resonate with a startup is not going to necessarily resonate with someone from a big organization or a big enterprise. So how are you thinking about that split?
Absolutely. We have 2 very different personas. I mean, when I'm talking to seed to sometimes Series A companies, I'm normally interfacing with another founder who knows their business intimately, has a pulse on the kind of investor asks and the fundraising needs of the company, but ultimately isn't always the most knowledgeable on the SaaS metric side. When I sell to more enterprise customers, I'm interacting mostly with business operations and finance teams. And they obviously have very different needs. They care a lot about process. They care about auditability. They understand these metrics really well, but they're really focused on how they present them better, how they interpret them better, and how they collaborate across the company better kind of around these numbers. So it is a different set of needs, and I have to put on a different hat. Well, if I'm talking to a founder, I talk a lot about my experience as the founder at SaaSGrid and managing our own metrics. If I'm talking to finance or BizOps, I go back to my days at BizOps at Zenefits and all the things that I had to manage there. So I do have to speak with them differently. And to be honest, we're not at the organizational maturity point where we've had to think about in our sales team or in our processes how we separate those out. But I imagine that we will over time.
On the topic of metrics, our audience loves to hear about growth and adoption. Are there any numbers and metrics that you can share that highlight some of the growth you're seeing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I could share at a high level. So SaaSGrid, we didn't sell our first paying customer till October of 2023. So just about 4 months ago. We had a decent period before then when we were purely a free product. So things have gone pretty well. We've signed up a couple dozen customers in that time. Our average contract value is just shy of $10,000. And so, yeah, the growth has been pretty good. I've been pretty happy with how many customers have been interested in SaaSGrid and that they've been willing to pay for the product. It's kind of an amazing feeling the first time you've been working on a product as a founder, typically for well over a year by that point, where someone says, yeah, I will give you money for this product that you created. That's some pretty incredible feeling. So that's where we are right now. We kind of have solid, consistent growth, and now our goal is to scale that.
We're depressingly already, 6 weeks into 2024. So I'm sure you've already long wrapped up your 2024 planning. If you look ahead at the next 11 months or whatever's left of 2024, what would you say are your top priorities and what's keeping you up at night?
Well, I will add, we're only 2 weeks into what SaaSGrid calls the SaaS year, meaning that many SaaS companies have a January 31st year end. So their AEs aren't busy trying to close end of year deals over Christmas. And I'll add, that's an example of a small feature that our users love about SaaSGrid is that so many SaaS companies have a January 31st year end. And in SaaSGrid, in one click, you can set all your metrics to use a January 31st year end, which isn't something that's available in most generic platforms. But to answer your actual question, yeah, I have basically at the point now where I have set my high level goals for this next year. And there's a lot that keeps me up at night. We basically want to 10x the size. We basically want to 10x our ARR this year, which is a lofty goal, but I think is achievable based on the demand that we're seeing. So there's two things that outside of I'll leave the product side aside for a minute. There are obviously a lot of product milestones that we have to hit our goals. But on the go-to-market side, it's going to take ending the year at least a 3-person sales team to basically hit our ARR goals. And so that means recruiting and training and ramping at least, which is not something we've done successfully as a company yet. So that definitely keeps me up at night. And then on the other side, if that's the growth side, to go back to my metrics that matter, on the retention side, we obviously have to keep our existing customers happy, keep shipping new product for them, onboard them onto those new features, hopefully get them to use more features and expand their contracts, which means building out a customer success function. So in short, we have lofty goals for this year. We have to build a real sales and a real customer success team in order to do that. And that's what I'm most focused on right now.
What's been the most important decision that you've made to date?
Probably going back a while, I mentioned that we built the initial version of SaaSGrid with some contractors. When we decided we want to turn it into a real company, I actually brought my brother on as my technical co-founder. So my brother, Teddy, was at the time a software engineer at a firm. They had just gone public and we chatted about it a long time. And to be honest, I was a little on the fence. I'm like, does it make sense to work with my brother? Is he going to be the right person for this role? Are we going to work well together? But he came on as the technical co-founder about 18 months ago, and he's been amazing. He's rerun the whole app. He's recruited a great engineering team, set a great engineering culture, and it really has set the trajectory for everything we've been able to do at SaaSGrid. Obviously, we need to have an amazing product in order to be successful, and I've been really happy where the product is at today.
What have you learned about fundraising throughout this journey?
It's easier if you don't really have to do it. So again, there are benefits of being spun out and incubated at Craft led our seed round and did the majority of the investment. We brought on some other high quality angel investors and small funds to help as well. But to be honest, being able to do it directly with people that I've worked with for a long time and really trust at Craft was amazing. It made the process really easy and simple and not something I had to stress about.
Let's imagine I come to you and I say, Ethan, I have this idea for a SaaS company. Based on everything you know about the SaaS market, everything you've learned building the company, what would be the number one piece of advice that you'd give me?
That's a really good question. So it's not the most original, but I really think is true. I would say, what is your wedge? How are you going to get your early users excited about using your tool right now? There are so many SaaS apps out there. There are just so many SaaS companies. Many of them are very flexible and powerful, and many of them can do so many things. I mean, if you take Salesforce for an example, technically you can build anything that you want on Salesforce if you put enough time and effort into it. However, when you look at the market, the reason why new successful SaaS companies are created every day is that business users still have a lot of pain points that could be solved with software, but aren't. And so if you find a really amazing pain point, if you find a business user that's being absolutely driven crazy by a problem, and you could solve it elegantly and get them to pay even a little bit for it, I think you have the basis of being successful. Everything else around how much they pay and how big the market is and all these other things, everything else is secondary. If you could solve that problem, you're doing better than most.
Final question for you. Let's zoom out 3 to 5 years into the future. What's the big picture vision that you're building here?
Yeah. So right now, SaaSGrid is the analytics layer for SaaS companies. I want SaaSGrid to be the all-in-one operating hub for SaaS companies. And what that means to me is right now, SaaSGrid does amazing financial analytics on your customers. I think we can really broaden the analytics that we do. So for example, some easy area, not easy, but some big areas where SaaSGrid can help and add analytics is into your sales pipeline and your marketing pipeline. And on the other side, into your invoicing and receivables system and into your future FP&A models. And we could also supplement with things like product analytics. Once we have this broader range of data in SaaSGrid, we can transform not just from an analytics layer, but into a workflow layer. Meaning that instead of just telling you what data lives in Salesforce and what data lives in Stripe and what data lives in QuickBooks, we can actually help push data between these systems and make sure that they always stay in sync for you. That's the big vision for SaaSGrid. Long-term, not just to be a platform to consume data, but to actually set up the workflows and make your whole business run automatically.
One other question that I did want to ask about. So the guys from Basecamp, I'm sure you're familiar with them. They put out a lot of content. They just put out a piece a while back, kind of said that SaaS was dead. I think that was like the statement they're trying to make. They're famous for making these kind of bold statements. What's your response to that? Is SaaS dead? Is SaaS dying?
I couldn't disagree more. Everyone said AI is killing SaaS. Well, what is AI but a SaaS product? I mean, OpenAI is a SaaS company. They sell software to consumers and businesses in exchange for subscription revenue. This idea that enterprises, that businesses are not going to pay for software is silly. Now, the business models are evolving for sure. Pricing is changing. We're moving from a per seat model to a lot of usage-based models. Legacy applications that can adapt some of the new AI technologies are going to be left behind. But ultimately, AI and everything going on in the market right now is an accelerant for businesses buying more software. And SaaSGrid wants to be the platform that can support both the existing SaaS companies as they make this leap into a new AI world and the new companies that are going to emerge that are going to be AI native from day one.
Amazing. All right, Ethan, we are up on time, so we'll have to wrap here. If there's any founders that are listening in that want to follow along with your journey, where should they go?
Absolutely. Come join us at SaaSGrid.com. We're pretty easy to find. You can explore our product there. You can read our blog where David and I break down these metrics and talk about how to analyze your business. And you can get started on a completely free version of SaaSGrid. It's completely free to get started. You can use a lot of our product for free and start to dig into your metrics and start making better decisions.
Amazing. I love it. Ethan, thanks so much for taking the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. This has been awesome. Have a good one.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.